how robust is the freedom of the press we enjoy here in Montreal? Well, Matt Damour is a journalist with Concordia's Link University newspaper. Concordia's Link newspaper. And he also partners with 99% Media, which is a live streaming citizen journalist organization. He regularly live streams protests in Montreal, uses his smartphone, and this usually goes off without incident. As anyone who watches the news knows, we journalists are allowed to cover protest, and we're also allowed to cover the way protests are policed. But on Friday, when Matt Damour was mid-live stream, this happened. You can hear the police officer there saying, fermez, fermez, shut down your phone. Matt says no, and then the stream goes dead. Matt is live in the Daybreak studio. Matt Damour, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. What exactly happened there on Friday? We heard some of it, but what was the actual scene?
So there was a smaller scale protest on Friday that began at McGill University, and it was in solidarity with the Unistoten First Nations blockade in BC. I was covering it. We had about 40 or 50 people who were present protesting, and as I often do, I was live streaming it for the Link and 99 Media. All told, the protest lasted for about 10 to 12 minutes, and at the 10-minute mark there on that live stream, the police moved in on de Maisonneuve and Stanley on that intersection to block off the protest and to apprehend some people. One person was arrested and several tickets were given out, and one of those tickets was actually given to me. Now, what happened was a police officer came up to me as I was filming some of the detainment that was happening. He actually put his hand on my wrist and grabbed me and asked me to move towards the front of his police van. I listened to the directives. I was being cooperative, but he still kept his hand on my wrist. And in the other hand that was free, I still had my mobile device, which I used to live stream and show those images live. And he asked me, as you heard there, twice to turn it off. And I protested politely that I was not going to be doing that.
Did he know that you were there working as a journalist and not a protester?
It would be very difficult not to realize that. I had my press credentials from the Link newspaper, which is accredited with Canadian University Press, with my picture on it. It was fully visible. You can also overhear me at the protests. I'm live streaming, but also commenting on the events as they happen. So there was very little doubt in my mind that I was there live streaming, and I was not protesting.
What reason did the officer give for giving you a ticket?
Now, when I pointed out that I was there as a journalist, the police officer actually made kind of an odd statement. I said, well, look, I'm not here protesting. He said, well, we've had our eye on you since the beginning of the protest. He didn't elaborate on this further, and I did find that quite odd. Was it that I was being targeted because I was media, that I was not the right kind of media? And essentially, the ticket that was given to me was under Section 500.1 of the Highway Safety Code in Quebec, the same ticket that was given to everybody else, saying that I took part in a concerted action meant to block traffic.
Right. And what's your view on whether you were in violation of that part of the code?
Right. Very specifically, I will be contesting the ticket because brass tacks is that I am not guilty of the offense that I'm accused of on that ticket. It isn't in the purview of a journalist to take part in a concerted action to do anything except report the news. And on a technical point, I would also point out that it would have been impossible for me to block access to traffic anyways, since intersections on de Maisonneuve had been blocked by police vehicles, so there was no traffic to block by just being there.
We are about to hear from a lawyer who will tell us that you are within your rights to film, to do the live streaming that you do. But in the moment, is there anything you felt you could actually do or say to the police in order to regain your freedom to film?
Mm-hmm. In those situations, what I've learned, I've had some close calls in terms of being detained, not through action of my own, I believe, just sometimes these situations escalate and things get a little bit tense, and you try to be cooperative. I have a general rule of listening to police directives as much as possible, because if you don't, you risk the chance of being taken out of play and not being able to report, and that helps nobody. But I did everything I thought I could do. I calmly explained that I was a journalist, I was accredited, my press credentials were there, but the police officer was having none of it.
If you were a CBC journalist or a La Presse journalist or Montreal Gazette, how do you think it might have played out?
It's an interesting question. It brings up a really serious debate that we should be having, I believe, about who is a quote-unquote professional journalist, who has the right to be covering these kinds of things. I think back specifically to last spring, where another 99% Media live streamer, Simon, was live streaming a student protest, and as some arrests were being made, he was trying to get a little bit closer to the action, and he was told by police, well, you can film from over there where the other protesters are. And when he said, well, how come the CBC, how come Radio-Canada gets to be closer? And live on the air, he had a police officer say to him, well, that's different. And that's the debate I think we should be having, is why is that different and who gets to decide?
Well, that's one of the questions we'll put right away to Mark Banty, who's a lawyer specializing in media law here in Montreal at Gowling, Lafleur, Henderson. He's live with us on the phone this morning. Maître Banty, morning to you.
Good morning.
What about that particular point that Matt just made? Who exactly does have the right to film, and does it matter what your press credentials are, whether you have press credentials at all?
I don't think it matters. I think the key criterion is whether or not you're there to convey information to the public, and that's the role of a journalist. And it's whether you're working for CBC or The Link, you're a journalist, and I think the authorities have to respect that.
So what restrictions are there on a journalist's or anybody's right to film a protest and to film the police as they police a protest?
The only restriction is that you're not allowed to interfere with the police's work. And I think a citizen, just like a journalist, is entitled to film interventions made by the authorities in a demonstration, for example. There's no restriction there other than you're not allowed to interfere with the work of the police officers. And also, like any other citizen, you have to respect any municipal bylaw pertaining to demonstrations or interfering with traffic. If a police officer asks you to get off the street, you get off the street if it's an illegal demonstration. If it's a legal demonstration, you're allowed to be on the street, then the journalist is allowed to be there just as a citizen is.
Well, and in this case, Matt Damour's case, the officer took the phone, the device out of his hand that was live streaming and put it in his pocket. Now, based on that and what you have heard, how comfortable would you be representing him in court?
Well, I don't know about I'm not sure what infraction he was charged with a municipal bylaw, but I don't think the police officer has the right to seize a telephone. A police officer can tell you to turn the phone off while he's giving you a ticket, and as the journalist pointed out, he tried to cooperate as much as possible with the police officer, and that's what you do. Just from a practical point of view, as a journalist, you cooperate with the police officer. If the police officer tells you to turn off your phone while he's giving you a ticket, then you do so, and then you put the phone back on when the officer has finished his work. But I mean, if the officer is not detaining you, you have every right to continue filming, and there's no restriction other than the one I mentioned.
For freedom of the press, I mean, it really is a cornerstone of democracy in Canada, but a right is really only a right if you can have it respected. I mean, if the police are violating it in the field, then do we really have it? I wonder what you think the best way is to get Montreal police to respect the law.
Well, I think that journalists just have to educate the police about their rights, and I think that's the role of the news media, is to put pressure on the police to ensure that their rights are respected.
Journalists have to educate the police about the law.
That's right.
It sounds like that's the wrong way around.
Well, that's a fact. I mean, the police sometimes fail to respect the fundamental rights of journalists and of the public, and it's a question of educating the police about the rights of the media.
Mark Banty, lawyer specializing in media law at Gowling, Lafleur and Henderson. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
And Matt, we did ask to speak to someone from the Montreal Police. No one was available. What are you going to do about this?
Well, beyond contesting the ticket, because as I said earlier, I do firmly believe that I'm not guilty of the offense that's described on the ticket. He brought up an interesting point, which is this idea of education. I do plan on pursuing the matter further, specifically because I feel that my constitutional right under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was violated for free press. That's Article 2B, and it's also under the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. I'm not in this for vindication. I don't need to go out there and feel personally that, I've got one over the police. It really is about creating a safer environment for the police, the protesters, and the journalists. And what I would like to say also is that this is not a problem that's going to go away. This is the new dynamic for journalism. We talk about it all the time in journalism school, on the field. Anybody can be a journalist to a certain extent. The barrier to entry is so low. I'm one person with a Twitter account and a phone, and I'm able to reach tens of thousands of people. people, which I have done, and anybody has that access. So the old paradigm of saying, well, this person is a kind of journalist that we're going to recognize and give a little bit more leeway, and this person isn't, it's the old paradigm, and it's a new technological paradigm.
Matt Damore, who is a journalist with Concordia's Link newspaper and also partners with 99% Media. Your thoughts, 514-566-9066. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.